I still don't know how to say it, how to put into words what happened on that trip without sounding like a total mess, or worse, like I'm bragging about something I shouldn't. It's been months, and every time I see him, it's like there's this invisible wall between us, thick and awkward, made of unsaid things. We didn't talk about it. Not once. And maybe that's what made it all so complicated. So here's the deal. I'm still thinking about that week in Portland like it was some kind of turning point I never saw coming. And honestly, I don't even know if he thinks about it at all. His name's Eli. We met last year through a mutual friend at a party that started way too late and ended in a dumb game of truth or dare, but not the kind where you dare someone to kiss a stranger. This was different. Somehow, we just clicked right away. Funny, sarcastic, sharp as hell, but also way softer than he let on at first glance. He's the kind of guy who laughs loud and makes you think you're the only person in the room, even if there's 50 other people around. Anyway, we planned this trip to Portland because neither of us had been, and it was supposed to be a chill vacation. No pressure, just two guys exploring a city we knew nothing about, eating too much food, drinking coffee, and maybe catching a show or two. We didn't exactly say it out loud, but I think both of us knew it was a chance to see if there was something more than just friendship simmering beneath the surface. The first few days were classic vacation vibes, awkward selfies in front of random murals, walking way too much while arguing over which food truck had the best tacos, and late-night conversations that somehow made the world feel smaller. It was easy, comfortable, like we had done this kind of thing 100 times before. But then something shifted, and I swear I still can't pinpoint the exact moment. It was late one night after we'd finished at a dive bar with way too much neon and a band playing covers of old rock songs. We were walking back to our Airbnb through these narrow, dimly lit streets, trying to avoid the rain that had just started to drizzle. I don't even remember who said what, but suddenly we were standing in front of this tiny coffee shop that was closed, and the silence between us stretched in a way that felt different, more charged, less casual. I looked over at Eli, and there was this flicker in his eyes that made my heart do something I didn't expect. I wanted to ask him about it, to say something stupid like, "So, are we just gonna pretend this night didn't happen?" But the words got stuck, and I just nodded like a dope. We didn't say a thing. And then the rain picked up, and we ran the last block back to the apartment, laughing like idiots, trying to shake off the weirdness. That was the night everything changed, though no one said it. We spent the rest of the trip acting normal, but it felt like we were both tiptoeing around something huge. When we got back home, it was like that moment never existed. Like we were two strangers who just had a great vacation. Now every time I see Eli, that night hangs between us, unspoken and heavy. I don't know if he remembers it the way I do, or if he's just as lost in it. And honestly, I'm terrified to break the silence because I don't know where it would lead. But I also can't keep pretending it didn't happen. So here I am trying to figure out how to say those words, hoping I don't mess it all up. The thing about silence is how loud it can get. After we got back from Portland, I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting a text from Eli. Something simple. "Hey, got home safe?" Or "Still thinking about those tacos?" But the screen stayed stubbornly blank. And when I saw him in person, which wasn't as often as I wanted because life happens, we'd fall back into that easy surface-level friendship we'd always had. Jokes, stories, the occasional "we should hang out" that somehow never turned into actual plans. One Saturday, a few weeks after the trip, I ran into him at this new coffee shop downtown. I had just grabbed a latte and was about to leave when I spotted him in line, wearing his usual black hoodie and those glasses that make him look like he's perpetually studying something intense. I debated for a second whether to say hi or just keep walking, but my feet had other ideas. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual but probably sounding like I just solved world hunger or something. He looked over, surprised but smiling. "Hey, didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah, me neither. Small world," I said, digging my hands in my pockets. I wanted to ask about the trip, about that night, but the words got lost in the air again. Instead, I went with the safe route. "How've you been?" "Busy," he shrugged. "Work's been insane. You?" "Same. You know, adulting and all that." I could feel the awkwardness creeping in like unwelcome fog. After a beat, I blurted, "Listen, about Portland. I've been meaning to talk to you." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, and something in his eyes shifted. "Yeah?" I nodded, suddenly wishing the ground would swallow me whole. That night, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. About us. And I don't know if you felt the same or if I'm just inventing things. He was quiet for a moment, then motioned to the empty table by the window. "Let's sit." We ordered 2 more coffees, the silence stretching again as I waited for him to speak. Finally, he said, "I felt it too." It was like this weird, electric thing I wasn't expecting. Relief and anxiety collided inside me. So why didn't we say anything? Why did we pretend it was just a normal night? Fear, maybe. He glanced out the window, then back at me. Fear of messing up what we had. Or maybe just not knowing how to handle it. That hit me harder than I thought it would. Yeah, I didn't want to ruin our friendship either. But not talking feels worse. He nodded slowly. It does. We sat there, the noise of the coffee shop fading into the background, both of us caught in this fragile moment where everything felt possible and nothing was certain. Then he surprised me. "Want to talk about what actually happened?" I mean, if you're up for it. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to run, but the other part needed this, for once, to not be the guy who froze and ran away from what mattered. "Yeah," I said. "I want to." He smiled, a little nervously, and leaned in like he was about to tell me a secret. "Okay, so remember when we were walking back to the Airbnb and the rain started?" "Yeah. Well, after we stopped in front of that coffee shop, I was trying to figure out if you felt the same way I did. And when you looked at me like that, I almost kissed you. I felt my heart thump in my chest." "You almost?" "Yeah, almost. But I chickened out because I wasn't sure if it was the right time. I didn't want to scare you off." I laughed softly, the tension easing a bit. Funny, because I was thinking the exact same thing. For the first time in months, it felt like we were on the same page, or at least reading from the same book. I reached out and brushed a damp strand of hair off his forehead. "So what now?" He looked at me, eyes searching. "Maybe we stop pretending that nothing happened. Maybe we figure this out, one step at a time." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Yeah, I'd like that." We left the coffee shop that day with no grand declarations or promises. Just the quiet understanding that whatever was between us wasn't a mistake or something to ignore. It was real, messy, and scary, but real. Now every time I see Eli, that invisible wall feels a little less solid. And for the first time since that trip, I believe we might actually talk about what happened and where it could lead. After that coffee shop conversation, things didn't magically become perfect, but they started to feel different. Like we were finally acknowledging the elephant in the room instead of tiptoeing around it like strangers sharing a sidewalk. I won't lie though, opening that door was more nerve-wracking than I expected. A couple of days later, Eli texted me out of the blue. "Want to grab dinner tonight? I found a place that supposedly has the best mac and cheese in town." I stared at my phone for way too long, heart racing, before typing back, "I'm in." Dinner was at this tiny spot on the edge of downtown. Dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and a playlist that sounded like it was curated by someone who really knew their 90s indie bands. We slipped into a booth, and for a moment it felt like old times. Comfortable, easy, nothing heavy. But I could tell Eli was holding something back. I took a deep breath, deciding to be the one to break the pause. "So, about the trip. About us. I guess I've been scared to admit how much that night stuck with me." He smiled. That kind of small, knowing smile that makes you wonder if he's been replaying the same late-night scene over and over. Me too. I kept telling myself it was just a fluke, a weird coincidence, but it wasn't. I was scared we'd ruin everything. I admitted. We've been friends for so long, and honestly, I didn't want to lose that. "Same," he said quietly, "but I've realized maybe we're already risking losing it if we don't try." That hit me like a punch and a hug all at once. "So, what do we do now?" He shrugged, but there was this hopeful light in his eyes. "I don't know. Maybe take it slow, see where this goes without rushing it." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "I can do that." We ordered the mac and cheese, which was everything the internet promised and more, and spent the rest of the night talking about everything and nothing. Old memories, future plans, The dumb movie that made us both laugh until we couldn't breathe. At one point, he reached across the table and took my hand. It was a simple gesture, but felt like a quiet promise. After dinner, we walked through the city streets, the night cool and quiet around us. We didn't hold hands or steal kisses, but the space between us felt charged, like we were both waiting for the right moment to bridge it. A couple of weeks passed, and we fell into this strange, tentative rhythm. We texted more, random messages about our days, stupid memes, song recommendations. We went on more dates, but always careful not to rush, like we were savoring something fragile. I was surprised by how natural it felt, even with all the unspoken fears. One night, Eli invited me over to his place to watch some old movies. We sprawled out on his couch with a bowl of popcorn between us, and halfway through the second movie, he shifted closer. His hand found mine again, fingers intertwining. "Hey," he whispered, "can I ask you something? Anything. Are you scared?" His voice was barely audible. I looked at him, really looked, and realized that beneath all the jokes and casual smiles, he was vulnerable. "Yeah," I admitted. "I'm scared of messing it up, of losing you." He squeezed my hand gently. "Me too. But maybe it's worth the risk." I smiled, feeling all the tension I'd been carrying start to unravel. "Yeah, I think it is." That night, we didn't rush anything. We just stayed close, letting the silence speak for us. It was the first time since the trip that I felt like maybe we were moving from almost to something real. But of course, nothing worth having is ever that simple. About a month later, things hit a snag. We were supposed to meet up for dinner, but Eli texted me from the airport saying he had to leave town unexpectedly for work. I understood. His job was unpredictable, but still, I couldn't shake this sinking feeling. When he finally came back a week later, there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. We met for coffee, and it was like trying to watch a movie with the sound off. We smiled, joked, but the connection felt frayed. Finally, I asked, "What's going on?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I guess being away made me realize I'm not sure I'm ready for this. For us." My heart dropped, all the hope from before slipping like water through my fingers. "I get it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wish you'd told me sooner." He looked at me, eyes glossy. "I was scared you'd walk away." "Maybe I would have," I admitted, "but maybe I wouldn't." We sat there, caught between wanting to hold on and knowing we needed to figure out what we really wanted. The silence between us this time felt heavier, no longer just unsaid feelings, but fears and doubts. That night, I went home and stared at my phone, the same way I did after Portland. Only this time, I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. I guess some things don't get easy just because you say them out loud. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't really move forward without facing the messy stuff. And maybe, just maybe, Eli and I are still figuring out how to do that together. That week after Eli came back, when he said he wasn't sure if he was ready for us, I did a lot of overthinking. Like, way too much. I found myself replaying every conversation, every look, every awkward pause from the trip and since then. Maybe I'm just prone to catastrophizing, but I started wondering if I'd read the whole thing wrong. Maybe that night in Portland didn't mean as much to him as it did to me. So I did what any rational person would do. I avoided him. Not outright ghosted or anything, but I stopped initiating. I figured if he needed time, I'd give him space. But space turned into radio silence and occasional texts that felt like polite check-ins rather than the usual banter we had. It pleased me. Then one evening, about 10 days after his return, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "Can we talk? In person?" I stared at those words for a solid 5 minutes before typing back, "Yeah, when? Tonight? My place." I told him I'd be there in 20 minutes. When I got to his apartment, the place was dimly lit, candles flickering on the windowsill, and there was a nervous energy in the air I hadn't noticed before. Eli was pacing when I walked in, and for a second, I thought maybe he was having a panic attack or something. "Hey," I said softly, setting my bag down. He stopped and ran a hand through his hair, then smiled shakily. "Hey, thanks for coming." We sat down on the couch, the silence stretching, until he finally broke it. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, eyes fixed on his hands. "About us, about that trip, and what happened since. And I realized I was scared. Not just scared of us, but scared of what it means." "Scared how?" I asked, leaning in. He met my gaze, and for the first time in a while, I saw something raw, real. Scared that if we take this further, it'll change everything about our friendship. "I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to live with regrets." I nodded slowly. "I get that. I feel it too. But I think we're already changing things, whether we want to or not. Pretending nothing happened hasn't worked." "No, it hasn't," he agreed. "I guess I just needed time to admit it to myself." We talked for hours that night, about fears, hopes, and all the little moments we'd shared that had meant more than we let on. I told him about the nights I stayed awake, wondering if he was thinking of me the same way, and he confessed that he'd been doing the same. There was a moment, late into the conversation, when he reached out and took my hand again. This time, it felt different, less tentative, more certain. "Maybe we don't have to figure everything out all at once," he said quietly. "What if we just take it day by day? See where it goes without overthinking?" I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. I'd like that. The weeks that followed were a mix of exhilarating and terrifying. We started spending more time together, not just as friends hanging out, but as something new. Our first real date was at a small art gallery opening. We walked around, admiring the paintings, stealing glances, and occasionally brushing hands. By the end of the night, we sat on a bench outside under the stars, and he kissed me, soft and slow, and exactly what I needed. But even with that spark, we still had to navigate the awkwardness. There were moments when doubt crept in, when one of us would pull back or say something that felt like a test. Like the time Eli avoided holding my hand in public because he wasn't ready for people to notice. Or when I caught myself hesitating before texting him goodnight, afraid of being too clingy. Still, we kept at it. Because despite the fear and the confusion, something felt right. One afternoon, Eli invited me to his favorite hiking trail just outside the city. We spent the day getting lost in the woods, talking about everything from childhood memories to our biggest insecurities. At the summit, with the city sprawled out below us, he turned to me and said, "Thank you for sticking around, for being patient." I looked at him, heart full. "I'm not going anywhere." We kissed there, the wind whipping around us, and I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Of course, life isn't just romantic hikes and perfect kisses. There were still rough days, jobs getting in the way, old habits clashing, that lingering fear of the unknown. But somehow, facing it all with Eli made it manageable. Now, when I think back to that trip in Portland, the silence, the almosts, the unspoken, I realized it was less about that one night and more about the journey we chose to take afterward. Because sometimes it's not the moment itself, but what you decide to do with it that makes all the difference. And for us, we're still figuring it out, step by step, day by day, but this time, together. Things felt like they were settling into a rhythm, the kind that made me feel cautiously hopeful but also aware that nothing was guaranteed. Eli and I were no longer just friends dancing around a secret. We were trying to build something new, something fragile and exciting all at once. But sometimes, that kind of change comes with unexpected challenges. It was a Friday night when the tension first crept back in. We'd planned a low-key dinner at my place, just us and a takeout pizza. But from the moment he walked in, something felt off. Eli was quieter than usual, distracted, and I could tell he was holding something back. After we ate, I finally asked, "Hey, what's going on? You've been kinda distant tonight." He sighed and looked down at his hands. "I've been thinking about work. There's a project coming up that might require me to move to another city for a few months, like potentially far away." My stomach sank. We'd been taking things slow, but this was the kind of curveball that made all the uncertainty hit hard. Months? Like how many? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe 3, maybe 6. It's still up in the air. I tried to mask the punch I felt in my chest. Have you told your boss what you want? About us, I mean? Eli shook his head. No, I don't even know if I'm ready to tell them. Or you. I'm scared it'll just complicate everything. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of an unspoken future hanging between us. Finally, I said, I get it, but I don't want to pretend this isn't happening. We need to figure out how we handle this. Together. He met my eyes, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of hope. Together, he repeated. The following weeks were a test of what we'd built. We tried to be honest with each other, but the looming possibility of distance made every conversation loaded. We talked about visiting each other, about video calls, about trying to keep things alive despite the miles, but I could feel the cracks starting to show, the late-night doubts, the moments when one of us would pull away without explanation. One night, a few days before he was supposed to find out about the move, we met at our favorite little bar downtown. It was packed but cozy, the kind of place where the bartenders knew your name and your usual drink. Eli looked tired, and I could tell he was wrestling with something big. We ordered our drinks, and I waited for him to speak. I'm scared, he admitted after a while, about what this means for us, about losing what we have. I reached across the table and took his hand. We won't lose it, not if we don't let go. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't want this to be another thing we don't talk about, like Portland. That hit me harder than I expected. The trip, the silence, the unsaid feelings, it had been the foundation of everything between us. And now history was threatening to repeat itself. I don't want that either, I said. Maybe this time we can do better. He nodded slowly. We'll try. Days later, Eli got the news. The move was definite. He was going to have to leave in 3 weeks. We spent those last days in a whirlwind of emotions. Late-night talks, stolen kisses, and promises that felt both comforting and fragile. We tried to live fully in the moment, but the ticking clock was always there, reminding us that things were about to change. On his last night before leaving, we went back to that hiking trail where we'd shared one of our first kisses. The city lights twinkled below us, and the air was crisp with early fall. We sat side by side on a rock, not saying much at first. Then Eli turned to me, eyes shining with something fierce and vulnerable. Whatever happens, he said softly, I want you to know that this, us, it's real, and it's worth fighting for. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I believe that. We stayed there for a while, wrapped up in each other's arms, trying to etch the moment into memory. The next morning, I helped him pack, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. When it was time to say goodbye at the airport, everything felt unreal. The noise, the crowds, the finality. We hugged tight, and just before he walked away, he pulled me close and whispered, We'll figure this out. As I watched him disappear through the gate, I realized that talking about what happened on that trip was never really the point. It was about what came after. The choices, the risks, the courage to keep trying, even when it's hard. And so, here I am, holding on to that hope, waiting for the day we can talk again. Not just about the trip, but about everything that's waiting for us beyond it. The days after Eli left felt unreal. The apartment was too quiet, the bed too big, and every little thing reminded me of him. The scent lingering on his jacket, the way his phone lit up with messages from me that I'd reread over and over. It was like the city had shifted on its axis, and I was the only one still spinning. We talked, of course. Texts, calls, video chats, the usual long-distance toolkit, but nothing ever quite felt enough. Some nights, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was fooling myself that this could work. Distance has a way of sneaking in doubts like unwelcome guests. One Friday night, a week into his new city, I was scrolling through my phone when a message popped up from him. I miss you. It was simple, but it hit me like a punch and a hug all at once. I typed back immediately, I miss you too. That turned into an hours-long conversation. Us sharing the small details of our days, the mundane stuff that somehow made the miles feel smaller. It was comforting, but also painfully bittersweet. A few weeks later, I flew out to see him. Partly because I was going crazy, partly because I wanted to remind myself that this wasn't just a digital mirage. His city was different, busy, loud, a little overwhelming. But Eli was still the same guy who could make me laugh with a look or a snarky comment about terrible coffee. We spent a weekend exploring together, walking through crowded markets, trying street food, and arguing over which dive bar had the best jukebox. But underneath the fun was this undercurrent of urgency. Like we both knew the clock was ticking, and we had to make every moment count. One night, after a long day of wandering, we ended up back at his apartment. We sat on the couch, close but not touching, the silence growing. "I hate that you're so far away," I finally admitted. He looked at me, eyes tired but sincere. "Me too, but I also hate that you're the one who left your comfort zone for me." I laughed softly. We both did. He sighed and reached for my hand, fingers intertwining. "I don't want to do this half-assed, you know? I want us to be all in, but it's hard to be all in when you're not here." I nodded. "I get it. I want that too." For a moment, it felt like we were on the edge of something important, but then hesitation crept back in. "Do you think this is going to work?" I asked quietly. Eli's jaw tightened. "I don't know, but I want to try." That's when I realized that love, real love, doesn't come with guarantees. It's messy, uncertain, and sometimes it hurts, but it's also worth fighting for. The weekend flew by, painfully fast, and when it was time to leave, we promised to keep trying. To be honest, even when it's hard. Back home, I try to focus on work, friends, and the small routines that kept me sane. But Eli was always there, a text away, a memory away. Months passed, and we settled into a strange new normal. Visits became our lifeline, and late night calls our ritual. We talked about the future more now, the scary stuff, the possibility of me moving or him coming back, or what happens if one of us meets someone else. One evening, after a particularly long call, Eli said something that surprised me. "I don't want to do this forever like this. I want to wake up next to you. I want to build a life with you." My heart raced. Me too. That night, we started making plans. Not the vague, hopeful kind, but real ones. Saving money, job searches, timelines. It felt like the first time we were both truly on the same page. Still, there were days when I'd catch myself panicking. What if it doesn't work? What if the distance has already taken its toll? But then I'd think about that trip to Portland, that night we never talked about, and how far we'd come since. I'd remember his laugh, his hand in mine, the way he looked at me like I was the only person that mattered. No, it wasn't perfect. It was messy and scary and uncertain, but it was real. And sometimes real is enough. The day I finally moved to be with Eli wasn't marked by grand declarations or sweeping gestures. It was just a quiet Tuesday with an overcast sky, a single suitcase, and a heart full of hope and nerves. Standing outside his apartment, I could feel my palms sweating, which was ridiculous because I'd been dreaming about this moment for months. But still, the weight of everything, the distance, the doubts, the unspoken fears pressed on me. When he opened the door, his smile was the same as it had been from the very beginning. Warm, genuine, like he'd been waiting for me all along. Without a word, we embraced. The kind of hug that speaks louder than any confession. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was truly home. We spent that evening unpacking my things, stumbling over each other in a way that made it clear we weren't just roommates, we were something more fragile and precious. There wasn't any pressure to define it all at once. Instead, we made space for the little moments. Cooking dinner together, sharing playlists, laughing over inside jokes that had grown between us. A few nights later, as we sat on his balcony watching the city lights flicker, Eli reached out and took my hand. "You know," he said softly, "I was terrified of losing what we had, but I've realized that sometimes you have to risk losing the familiar to find something better." I squeezed his hand and smiled. "Yeah. And sometimes, the thing you were scared to talk about is exactly the thing worth holding on to." We leaned into each other, the quiet between us comfortable and full of promise. Looking back, I see now that the trip to Portland wasn't just a week away from home. It was the beginning of learning how to be brave, how to be honest, and how to take a chance on someone who makes you feel seen. We didn't have it all figured out then, and we don't now, but that's the point. Life isn't about perfect moments or flawless timing. It's about the messy, beautiful stuff you build together. So yeah, we didn't talk about what happened on the trip, at least not right away. But in the silence, something was growing. And sometimes, the most important conversations happen not with words, but with the courage to keep coming back, again and again, to the person who makes you want to try.